there are various reports with regards to military build-ups and other activities in Jordan at the present time, which are not really receiving any attention in the media. What can you tell us about these things?
We first have to go back to the beginning of King Abdullah's reign. To say that Abdullah...
Remind us, please, when that was. When was that?
This was... I'm not exactly positively sure when it was, but it was in the wake of his father's death, of King Hussein's death.
About 25 years ago, I think.
Maybe 25 years ago, yeah. And to say that Abdullah is not his father would be an understatement. Abdullah understands that he's sitting on a volcano. He is, as I've pointed out, one bullet away from joining his father. The country is corrupt and economically bankrupt beyond belief. There is a deep well of resentment in the country due both to the economic mismanagement as well as this seething mass of Palestinians, quote unquote Palestinians, who live there. The majority, in fact, of the people who live in Jordan, who chafe under the rulership of not just a king who isn't Palestinian, but Bedouin on top of it. There's a real disconnect between the city dwellers, which are mostly the Palestinians, and the Bedouin, the Bidu, who make up the Hashemite tribe, originally from Saudi Arabia. They lost the Civil War, remember, and came to Jordan, were placed in Jordan by the British.
That's all very true, but we should just point out that in essence, all of them are Arabians. They all originate
completely
from Arabia and the surrounding deserts and areas.
Correct.
Until the great move out of Arabia under the so-called prophet.
Correct. So what's happened now is Abdullah changed the country's relationship to Israel. It's a technique that thugs and dictators use to redirect internal anger and resentment to an outside power. And it's very easy in this case, because Jordan is by far one of the most anti-Semitic countries in the world. I mean, it's enshrined in their constitution that it is strictly illegal to sell any land to a Jew, not Israeli, but to a Jew. That's in their constitution. So what's happened is Jordan, for at least 20, 25 years, has been waging diplomatic war on Israel in every international forum you choose to examine. Condemning us, vilifying us, calling us every conceivable name in the book. Again, as part of this effort to deflect or redirect a lot of this internal anger at the regime. Well, it's taken on a life of its own right now. And just recently, in the wake of this business in Gaza, the Jordanians kicked up their heels and said, we're going to break an agreement that we had sponsored by the UAE to build out a large solar park in Jordan to provide energy, clean energy for Israel, to desalinate water. And they would receive part of the water. And as part of the peace agreement between our two countries, we give them an extraordinary amount of water. We also signed an agreement to provide gas for their turbine plants, gas turbine plants, at good price, knockdown prices. Well, now they don't want any of this. It's like setting your hair on fire and trying to put it out with a frying pan. The two things that have gotten them very, very scared lately, well, Abdullah, very scared, is the notion that Jordan is Palestine. Wilders from Holland, the right-wing politician that may become the next prime minister of the Netherlands, just broke it loose again. It's an old idea. that I ascribe to as well sometimes, that look, your population is majority quote Palestinian. Maybe we should consider Jordan Palestine. So this set them off. The other thing that set them off was the notion that the evacuees from northern Gaza, and perhaps soon from southern Gaza as well, will have to find alternative lodging with their religious brethren, perhaps in Egypt, perhaps in Jordan, perhaps somewhere else in the region. And the Jordanians just don't want that at all. The rulers don't want that. They don't want any more Palestinians. So a few weeks ago, the Egyptians said they would fight to the death to prevent any introduction of Palestinian refugees into their country. They were quite angry about it, and they used words like that, fight to the death. Well, the Jordanians feel exactly the same way, having staved off a revolt, an uprising by the Palestinians in 1970, otherwise known as Black September, where Abdullah's father, Hussein, killed who knows how many thousands of Palestinians, civilians, not just PLO that staged the uprising, but innocent civilians. The Arab Legion went straight into the refugee camps and just slaughtered people. So they don't want any more of these Palestinians in the country. So what has happened lately? You would think that as an ally of the United States, at the least, they would conduct military maneuvers on the Syrian border to protect the US garrison at Al-Tanf, which is in eastern Syria, or military maneuvers in eastern Jordan on the border with Iraq, where US forces are being hammered almost every day by the local Shiite militia, Iranian-controlled Shiite militia. But no, what did they do? In an almost unprecedented maneuver, they held military maneuvers on our border, a largely defenseless and peaceful border. And they did so in the most provocative manner possible. What are we to make of this? Well, what they're doing is giving us a warning that if you want to see another October 7th, this time on the eastern part of the Negev, just continue thinking and saying something about Jordan is Palestine, or maybe Jordan should absorb some of the evacuees from Gaza. Just keep that up. This is war by other means, because now we have to keep an eye on this. And the fact that our own military and diplomatic establishment have been very quiet about the whole thing. They're scared because they themselves don't know what might happen. Look, more wars have been started by misperception in the Middle East than by calculation. And if the Jordanians don't watch out, the people of Jordan could compel a war. They could force the king to undertake stronger and more provocative actions that could possibly elicit a response from us, and then you have the cycle started. So what should we do about this? I think the first thing is we should realize that this war has been, diplomatic war has been ongoing ever since the inception of King Abdullah's reign, and we have not responded at all, ever, because we understand his position. The second thing we should consider doing is to retaliate for their breaking of this agreement to build a solar plant to provide us with power so we can desalinate seawater for them. Fine. They don't need our gas, and they don't need any of the other water that we've been providing them under the terms of the Israel-Jordan peace agreement.
I can mention in passing that I happen to know for a fact from persons involved indirectly with the discussions, negotiations, if you could call them by that term, as I'm about to explain, at the time when Israel decided in its infinite lack of wisdom conclude a peace treaty with Jordan, as we all recall. And one of the bribes for them, one of the inducements for them to agree was to be given, as we said, much water.
A lot.
A tremendous amount of water. And I happen to know for a fact, again, from certain persons who were directly involved or indirectly involved, but had direct knowledge of how things worked, that the Jordanians came with a certain demand in terms of amounts of water that they demanded, fully expecting the Israelis to negotiate.
The souk, right?
Like any bazaar, like the shuk, you have to bargain. Obviously, that was their expectation. But no, seeing that, as Eliyahu Yossian is fond of pointing out, that we forget that we are in a region that eats hummus rather than sushi. In other words, we don't know how to speak we haven't yet learnt as a nation, apparently, to speak the language and haven't yet understood the local mores and culture. So instead of bargaining, we just said, yes, fine, whatever, that's the amount you want, it's yours. That's how it worked. That's what happened. And the Jordanians who came to have that little discussion walked away in total shock. They walked away in total shock. They could not believe that their original demand, their first and original demand, was accepted. So yes, I'm sorry. Go on. You were discussing Israel's the situation between Israel and Jordan. Yes.
Our options right now include, apart from the ones that I just mentioned, closing the border along the Jordan River to one-way traffic. If you want to leave, you're free to go, but no inbound traffic at all, either freight or personnel. We close the border. Number two, Eilat, we agreed to have 400 to 500 Jordanians from Aqaba work in Eilat as day workers every day. It brings a lot of money into Aqaba. That has to end. We have a lot of evacuees, Jewish evacuees, that could use the money in Eilat right now. And we're getting in new workers from Asia who could do the job just as easily and safer from our standpoint than the current Jordanian workforce provides. So there are things that we can do if we were a self-respecting nation. And none of our governments, least of all this one under Bibi Netanyahu, has the self-respect to say, you know what? You've spit in our face enough. Now there's going to be a reaction. You may not like it, but remember, you brought this on yourself. The only thing Abdullah fears more than a Palestinian uprising is the realization that we're not going to pull his chestnuts out of the fire like we did with his father in 1970, when our army actually more or less moved to cover the Jordanian army from a Syrian army invasion. You know, he's trying to get the best of this relationship without paying any price. Well, that has to end. And if the Americans wanted to play a constructive role in this neck of the woods, they could have a short conversation with Abdullah and tell him, you know, enough. The corruption is too high in your country. The waste and inefficiency is too corrupt. The fact that you still have Palestinians in refugee camps is enough. You got to give them citizenship, right? You have to change. You have to become you have to modernize. But they won't do that. The Americans won't at all. The Americans just sent a team there, in fact. For what reason? To reassure them that they've got us under the control and that we won't be sending any Palestinians or stampeding any Palestinians from Gaza into Jordan. That really helps us a lot. The last thing that we might do, operations on our border that scare the heck out of our people in the Negev for no good reason, fine. We'll break some windows over Amman with low-level supersonic passes. Maybe that'll get your attention, and maybe you can understand how angry we are about what you're doing down south on our border. That's the only way. This is the Middle East, for God's sake. If you don't respond disproportionately to a provocation, what are the enemies supposed to think at that point? You're a bunch of weaklings. So that's the situation with the Jordanians right now. And trust me, it will get a lot worse, and it won't get any better. Not the way things are going right now. Bibi and Gantz and Eisenkot and Gallant, these people are totally incapable of pulling up Abdullah short and saying, you know what, Buster? You depend on us more than we depend on you. So you better just stop what you're doing. And in the meantime, to get your attention, we're going to do these other things. Go get gas from your friends somewhere else. Go get water from somewhere else. Go get military protection from somebody else. Don't come to us. You're on your own. Have a nice day. That's what they understand in this area. And what will happen is the Saudis and the UAE will go to Abdullah and say, you know what, you really need to calm down.